Hello everyone, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Well, this week, continuing getting the front subframe or front frame modifications done. Last week I got the new subframe and cradle sort of in position. If you want to see that, there's a link. I think it's on this side, one of those sides, to that part. This week I'm going to get the cradle completely aligned first by setting up and doing what's called stringing the car. You'll see that first. I'll do a brief explanation on what I did and how I did it. Next, I have to be able to basically move the cradle back and forth as I make my cuts and adjustments necessary, and I finally figured out a way to do that and move it out of position and back into the exact same position. So we'll see that, and end up today with actually getting the subframe sections welded into place. So stay tuned. I'm going to go over just very quickly how I set up the strings on the car here. There are tons of websites, there's probably tons of YouTube videos that will show how to do this. Here's how I did it. The first thing you need to do when you're stringing a car is you need to build a box around the car without actually touching the car. In other words, it needs to be outside of the footprint of the car. Most guys, when they do it, they will take the rear portion back behind the back of the car. In my case, I didn't need to because my rear end is already square. So in that circumstance, all I needed to do, I kind of shortened mine up a little bit. But for all intents and purposes, what you need to do, the bottom string is the box. And the idea is, through a lot of measurements, you are essentially creating a square box all the way around the car, and that box should be square to the car. And there's a lot of measuring and whatnot that's involved with that, but that's the basics of it. And the idea behind that is once the strings are there, then you can drop reference points and marks on the ground that will give you essentially repeatability when you drop your plumb marks off of points on the car. So the second part of the string process is the upper string here. And the upper string, for me, was right height, or axle center line laterally. And the reason I needed to do that was, once I get the rear, since the car itself is level and square in all axes, I can set my axle center line on the rear, and I can repeat that here on the front. Another thing that I just recently started using, which has been a lifesaver compared to years past. If you're ever going to do this, I highly recommend, doesn't matter what brand it is, get a laser level. Doesn't have to be an expensive one. Just get one that's self-leveling. This thing is a lifesaver. What that allowed me to do was, it allowed me to set my upper string heights. Once I got one, it's repeatable around every corner. And it's amazing. It also showed me that the car was not exactly level on the bubble levels. It was about 3/16 of an inch leaning to the passenger side. So I fixed that as well. Okay, so back to the upper string. So the upper string is there simply to help me find my front wheel center line, front versus rear. Now, once I get my box square, my lower strings allow me to drop reference points on the ground. And what I'm looking for here is, I'm looking for all intents and purposes, in my case, 4 marks. One is on the ground, the axle center line for each wheel. So I've got one on the rear, I've got axle center lines marked for the front on both sides, plus accurate wheelbase. That will allow me to square the front end and get the front end height properly, just the way I need to be. So in this circumstance, I've done that. I've got the front end shimmed, or excuse me, not the front end. I've got the front suspension, front cradle shimmed in position. Next up, I'm going to lock that in place so that I can move it in order to marry up my frame rails. And I'll show you how I do that. Going to interrupt myself here for just a minute. One of the things I needed to do in the whole process of the three-dimensional cradle alignment extravaganza was I needed to make sure that the existing front suspension that came off the donor car was within spec as far as its alignment. So, you know, caster, camber, etc. So let's do a brief sideways segue into just how can you check that. In the process of getting the cradle lined up, level, even, etc., one of the things that I had to do, obviously the frame rails themselves need to sit level, but I needed to verify that by sitting the frame rails level, I was in the ballpark for wheel alignment. Steering angles, suspension angles, etc. So unfortunately, the footage I had of checking the alignment, couldn't find it, and so I'm recreating that now just to give you an idea of what I went through. So one of the things that once I got the cradle propped up, blocked up, leveled, I needed to make sure that I was in the ballpark for the caster, camber, etc. So here we go. Let's just see how that works. I know this is kind of after the fact, but it's at least give you an idea of what I did. So all you really need, don't need any fancy, although I have done alignments on computerized equipment, love it, it's great. But really all you need is a bubble alignment tool. Okay, and I'll show you how this thing works, and I'll show you what I did just to verify that I was in the ballpark on the angle, fore and aft angle that I had the cradle set at. So to use this guy is actually pretty easy as long as you just understand the basics of how your alignment works. So this tool measures, if you can see that or not, camber angle. It measures caster angle. It also measures kingpin alignment, which in this case, kingpin alignment is not really something we need to check. I can check it, but it doesn't really make any difference. So how you use one of these things, ideally, if you're actually doing a front end alignment with one of these, then you need a set of turn plates. And that allows you to turn the wheels back and forth. It's usually 20 degrees either side. That's for checking caster. But in this case, I don't have the wheels on and I'm not sitting on the ground, so turn plates don't do any good. But I can approximate that. And since I've got the suspension set at ride height, to use this thing, it's magnetic. You just sit it right there. I know I've got the front wheels straight ahead. I've checked those. So what we're going to do is we get it magnetically sitting here. We're going to level it with the bubble level right here. Okay, and all we have to do is go over here, check our camber angle. In this case, we're at about 0.3 negative. So you can see the bubble just to the left. That's maybe 0.2 negative, just to the left of the zero. That's on the negative side. So that's in the ballpark. And I'm not doing an alignment here. I'm just making sure that I'm in the ballpark. Okay. Okay, so with the camber checked, and both sides are within about a quarter of a degree of each other. So that in the ballpark scheme, it's inside of where I need it to be with the cradle at the angle it is. So that's good. Next, we need to check caster. So in order to check the caster, first thing we need to do, of course, we're at straight ahead steering now. You're supposed to turn the wheel, and in my case, I'll turn it to the left, 20 degrees. Now, since I don't have a set of turn plates, it's kind of hard to figure that out. But what I have figured out is by just turning the steering shaft about half a turn gives me pretty close to 20 degrees. For the right side here, I move the steering wheel 20 degrees to the right. I'm going to come back to our gauge here. We're going to level the gauge. Now we come to our caster with the knob on the bottom. Hope you can see this. With the knob on the bottom, I'm going to zero it. I'm going to zero the bubble. Okay. Then we take and turn our steering wheel opposite direction. So that should get me back to straight ahead, and we'll take it another half a turn or so, which should approximate, again it's not exact, but it should approximate 20 degrees. And come back. First thing we do, we level our bubble. Here. Let's read our caster, which in this case is about 2.6-ish. All right. So again, looking at the specs for the 2000 Z28 alignment, I'm within both camber and caster specs, and I haven't even started adjusting the suspension yet. So that tells me that my cradle is in the proper position, and I can continue forward and weld it in. Okay, so the next issue I run across is, now that I have, as you'll notice, I've got my strings out of the way. Since I have my marks on the ground, I don't need the strings anymore. But, pressing on. The next thing I have to do, now that I have the cradle in the exact location it needs to be, unfortunately I need to move it again. And I need to be able to replace it exactly in the position it was before. And so the question is, how to do that? Well, a little trip to the hardware store, picked up a 10-foot piece of black pipe, cut it in lengths, and we're going to weld or tack, I should say, the black pipe on each corner of the cradle, and then mark, just with spray paint, where the feet are. That way I can pull it out, put it right back, match up the marks, and have it back exactly in the same location. So let's do that. Now the last thing to ensure repeatability, let's hit the base here. With some spray paint. And that'll make sure that when I set it back, after doing all of my adjustments, it'll go back in the same place. Okay, let's let the paint dry. Let's move it out of the way and see if it works. Here's the plan. I've got to match these frame rails with these frame rails. You notice we're offset here, equidistance both sides on the inside, quite a bit off on the top, and we're off on the outside. Bottom, I've got a plan for that as well. So the plan is, and over here on this side, pretty much the same deal. So as it is now, I notched the Z28 frame so that the Firebird frame could slide inside and give me a little bit of extra metal to work with. So I'm going to start off by pulling the entire cradle back out of position. Then I'm going to relief cut in each corner both frames, about 3 inches or so. And that will allow me to individually move the metal I need on each facet into position. So basically I will be moving this side in, I'll be moving this portion out so that they match. Sort of the same thing here, except that I'm going to bring this up quite a bit and I'm going to actually kind of blend this frame rail into that frame rail on the top. I'll do the same thing on the outside. I'll reflex this out, I'll reflex this in, and on the bottom, the only difference I have on the bottom here, disregard that, that's going away. The only thing on the bottom is I've got to keep this mounting point for the cradle itself. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to bring from here straight back and add what I need here. When all of that's done, and all of this will be butt welded, but when all of that's done, each face will get a doubler plate, and that will give it probably more strength than the original frame, both original frames had. So let's get started with that. After, you could call it a considerable amount of removal, replacement, put it back in place, take it back out, cutting away and kind of working on both frame sections. I've got everything cut, not fully yet, but close enough, to the point where I took a hammer and just reflexed both inner frame sections enough that what I have to do now is just take the scribe and right centered along the frame section, both sides. So that'll be the first cut. Actually, technically it's about the 21st cut, but that cut will allow me to continue to reflex this frame rail, the Firebird frame rail, in to match the Z28 frame on the inboard section, on the inside section. So I'll start off with that and get that set. That'll be the first one. After that, I'll start working on the outside. Alright, let's see if we can just move this metal a little bit over. Pretty darn close. Need to get the bottom of it, but I think I'm going to have to relieve the lower frame rail just a little bit. I've double checked, triple checked every measurement possible, re-laser checked everything possible, and then I stopped, took a break, and then rechecked everything again. Everything's where it needs to be. My cuts are where they need to be. First weld on joining the two frame halves going in now. Tacks are done. Time to do some welding. Alright, let's hit the other side. Okay, so with the inside edges first weld done, next up I'm going to make a template for each side. I'm going to connect the top, bring it down to, probably about right here, and just connect these two. And that will be a butt weld, but remember there's going to be a doubler plate that's going to go over the top of this. So I will make up my templates, and we will, I'm actually going to cut the subframe, this part of the subframe out. Don't want a whole lot of metal sitting inside of here. That can actually cause stress points. So I will make my templates, we'll cut this out, and we'll get some patches made up for the upper portions of the frame rails. Cleaning up the shop does not help. I can lose things in a clean shop faster than I can lose them in my normal chaotic mess that you generally tend to see. Just so you know. Now, there's a reasonable chance that these were exactly in the last place that I left. Alright, first set of plates, this is on the top, is in. They're cut. They're in position. And ready to weld in. And there's the other side. So we'll get those welded in. Got my first side plate in. I need to trim this top plate, and I'll make a patch, use a template, make a patch to fit that, and same here. Alright, so let's find a reasonable place here to start cutting. That's still just a little bit hot. Okay, let's try a test fit. Alright, I know my hand's in the way a little bit, but give you an idea, I want to get this guy in here. I'm not bad, except that I need to take the angle a little bit there, and I'm probably a little bit off of here too. So I'll get the grinder up. We'll hit those real quick. Alright, trowel fit number 2. Better. Okay, that is doable everywhere except up at the top. Right up here, my tip is just too pointy. So let's fix that. Alright, let's try again. Much better. I like that. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to bevel. Actually, I need to clean the paint off all around here. But I also need to bevel these edges so I can get good penetration on the weld. That's weldable. Alright. Okay, I'm going to try and get me, you, the piece I need to weld, my hands, and the camera all in the same place. Let's see if I can make this happen. No guarantees. Okay, let's take a quick close-up, see what we're looking at. Alright, so we got good penetration, we got good coverage. I'll find, that's going to be hot, I'm not touching it. I'll find myself just a little piece to fill there and a piece to fill here, and on this side will be done, then we'll work on the other side. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Front subframe is welded into position, and next week I'll make the doubler plates, get the doubler plates welded in, and then start working on the front frame horns so I can get some sheet metal attached, and we can continue the mock-up on all the parts on the Firebird. I certainly appreciate everybody watching. Big thank you to everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe. It does help me out. Everybody, have a great day.